thank you, friends, for coming up here to have the Incarnational conversation with us. Can we just start with some introductions? And
of course.
Yeah, let folks know who you are.
Hi, Jason. Hello,
Hi.
everyone. My name is Adrienne Hymes, and I am the Diocesan Missioner for Church Extension in the Diocese of Southwest Florida. That is a fancy name for campus ministry, as well as church planting.
Nice. Great.
Hi, Chip Graves, priest rector in West Virginia. Yes, we have parishes in West Virginia. Trinity Episcopal Church, and we've developed an interesting and unique take on ABCD, Metro Theology.
Can you tell us what ABCD is real quick, just for the
Asset-based community development.
Thanks.
Because we're into acronyms.
Yes, love our acronyms.
I'm Donna Mote. I am Missioner for Engagement and Innovation in the Diocese of Atlanta. I'm also the Vicar of ATL, the world's busiest airport.
That's awesome. Thanks to all of you. So any initial thoughts listening to Regina and Tamara? Anything that you connected with that you'd like to start off with?
Listening. Go ahead.
You first, Chip.
No, the thing that was most profound to me is it's all about a listening. You know, we're in a country that seems to pursue and love and endear those who talk. But I think in ministry, the first step is to listen.
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy to forget that.
And also, just presence is important. We talked about that. I think it's great that we're at the end of this conversation, or at least basically we could call this a starting point. But we're at the end of several different points of the conversation where I think when Tamara talked about, tell me how you felt in your body when you talked about your ministry. When I talk about my ministry, I come alive. And if we are talking about ministry as we would when we read it out of a book, then that's not going to excite anybody to come to you or to ask questions. And it's important to have that passion as an instrument of God's mission.
Right.
You are the representation out there. So when she said, tell your narrative, the narrative is important, and the way that the narrative is told is even more important.
It's so true. Yeah, that testimony story. There was definitely in each of the narratives, it seemed to me, kind of that story of healing, of restoration, wedded with brokenness in there too.
Well, I will piggyback on that. I think you hit that right on the head with me. When we talk about narrative and how God calls us into ministry, the ministry that I have been called into is a ministry of restoration for the campus ministry at the University of South Florida. And when I was called there, it also made me reflect on the journey that has uniquely equipped me to be there. It has uniquely called the skills from my past life as a professional public relations and marketing person. How do all of those things come into being now so that I can uniquely serve that community? And when we talk about the brokenness, even here at VTS when I was here, I came from quite a challenging vocational discernment journey, and it is continuing on. But even in that narrative of brokenness and healing, I was able to come to this ministry from a very different place, a more compassionate place, and to be able to serve this community with ears and hearts that will engage students in their loss and in their grief and in their transformation.
Yeah, there seems, and that seems to be something that's transferred across the whole conversation, that there's oftentimes, whether we're talking corporately as a congregation or as individuals, we don't like failure. We don't like brokenness, and so we will gloss over or avoid those parts of the narrative. But what Regina embodied and demonstrated to us is kind of that the testimony, the story, has to include the whole narrative. And that's the beauty of it. So how about you? Things that stood out to you?
I would say both those things, and I would talk about them from two sides at least, as I want to do. So first, I would say I love talking about what I do. And I think we should have a competition in the room. Everybody who thinks they have the best job, right?
That's
People
right.
keep saying that. I'm like, no, I have the best job. So I can talk all day about it. But a big part of my exciting best job is to follow the advice of Will Rogers, never miss a good chance to shut up.
Lord knows I had to learn that one.
One of my dearest friends in the world is a guy named Woody. We were in the same class every year, kindergarten through 12th grade. He's a lieutenant in our home county police department, Henry County, Georgia. And from Woody, I have one of my best definitions of chaplaincy, which I think is translatable to lots of different aspects of ministry. Woody says, he's also a veteran of the Air Force, served a couple tours in the Middle East. He says, people need a safe place to talk about things they have seen that they can't unsee. Yep. Will you come and be a chaplain in our home police department so people can have a safe place, right? That's the invitation. Also, Carrie Newcomer, favorite singer-songwriter. One of her songs is Bearing Witness, which is what we're all being called to do in some way or other, maybe in multiple ways. She has this great line, could you be some forgiveness by not passing judgment?
Be forgiveness.
Could you be some forgiveness by not passing judgment?
Wow.
Bear witness.
Wow.
Yeah, bear witness.
Which comes back to that whole idea of presence. Can we just
be
bear
there?
witness? Test,
Yeah.
Wow, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
So I kept coming back this morning to a few things. I totally hear the listening thing. That was loud and clear, that idea of listening and receiving. But I also heard something loud and clear about setting people free. There's something about freedom, about the owning of our narrative and our story, of listening to the narrative of other people as creating an opportunity for invitation. That there's, it's the beggar that's found food and says, I know where you can get a meal, kind of a thing. Does that resonate with you? What does that look like in your work? How do we invite people into freedom in your experience, in your communities? What does that look like in your work?
I know we just talked about presence, but again, it is being with people. The ministry that I've been called into as the chaplain at the USF Episcopal Chapel Center, when I went there, was shut down for 5 months. And I got there and I said, whoa, this is a tomb, and that became kind of the message for me to say, you know what, this is the image. If this feels like a tomb and if it looks like an abandoned forest and things are dead on the outside, I'm trying to preach the gospel and my landscaping is saying something else. That's a problem, right? And so to be aware of that, but to also invite people to come and see, and using the assets that we have. One of the assets that I have that I didn't even know I had was this wonderful curiosity from the people who were there. Oh my goodness, you're an Episcopal chaplain? And I'm sorry, and you wear lipstick? Yes, I do. And you're not 85? Well, no, I'm not.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So,
you look pretty good for 85.
thank you. But there were a lot of things that were, there were perceptions that were there that I didn't know until I got there. And, from both sides, it is kind of breaking through those misperceptions of what a chaplain is, what a priest is, what a female priest is, what church is. And also, from my perspective, going into different churches and saying, just because my community is of an age group that you say is, oh, they're college students, they're gonna love this, and they're just gonna love to have fun, and they're just gonna, make sure you got a good volleyball team. It's that kind of stuff. So to be a witness to people and to say, actually, have you spoken to a campus person there? Have you talked to a college student lately? Other than your own child?
Our other chaplains in the room are feeling what you're saying
Thank you.
now.
But it's important for me, even in that presence, that there is a level of substance. I don't know many of you, but the people who do know me, I love to have fun too. But the FUN word has become something that makes me cringe in my ministry. There has to be substance. And the students that are now coming to the center, they know where they can get good volleyball. They're looking for someone who can address their spiritual suffering right where they are. And prayerfully, God has led me there to be that person. 'Cause that's what I went to VTS for. I didn't come here to learn to play volleyball. You know, I came to be God's witness in the world and to walk with people who need someone to walk with them.
Thank you. Yeah.
I guess me.
Hard act to
I'm
follow,
listening, Chip. I'm listening.
Because it is powerful that's going to come from these lips right now.
Uh-oh.
Gospel of Matthew has allowed us to change from either or to both and.
Bring it.
Yay.
And that's what we try to do in our little parish in West Virginia. It's not just the Old Testament. It's not just the New Testament,
Well,
but it's both and. That we are to fulfill what Isaiah promised in Jesus Christ. We do not abandon our traditions and our history and our Tiffany windows, but we carry it forward. We might actually lift our hands above our head once in a while. That's what we've tried to do. And that has given us some freedom. Because sometimes we try to live into the history, the tradition, my neighborhood. And that is a roadblock. That is a roadblock to talking, connecting, and being with and nurturing and loving other who may not be in our neighborhood, who may not be in our socioeconomic class, who may not be our color, who may not have our education, who may not just understand, who may not speak English. Verdad?
see?
You gonna keep listening over there?
I'm listening.
Think airplanes.
I work a lot with service members, and just talking about how can we facilitate healing for others. Enough of them have told me they understand the intention, but they really hate when people say, "Thank you for your service." And so it's like, so what should we say? And Bishop Magnus, our just retired previous Bishop of Armed Forces and Federal Ministry, said, say thank you for your sacrifice and see how that changes the conversation. And it changes the conversation. And it's not the first thing I say, but on Mondays at ATL, I'm the escort of the military escorts accompanying military remains through the airport. And it's not the first thing I say, hello and thank you for your sacrifice. I say, hello, I'm sorry for your loss. This is somebody they know has just died. And then as they leave, I say, thank you for your sacrifice. And they hear that. They hear that. So I think what I want to do is commend something to everybody, which is the platinum rule. So I love Jesus, and I love the golden rule. I want to suggest, though, that the golden rule applies to those who are already inside. Do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. We kind of have a similar understanding, though divergent and diverse and wonderful. We sort of understand what we mean when we talk about Christian stuff, yeah? We kind of know some of the words and ways of Jesus. We hope so. I hope it looks more so as we move forward. But what about people who don't have that vocabulary? And there are lots of them now, yeah? So the platinum rule. First, let's recite together the golden rule. Do unto
Others as you would have them do unto you.
Platinum rule. Do unto others as they would have you do unto them. How are you going to know what that is?
That's good. That's good. So you were referring to the golden rule, and that corporately we tend to at least say we know what that looks like and what.
Please
what
don't tweet Diocese of Atlanta staffer rebukes golden rule. Please don't do that. Please don't do that.
What happens at VTS?
Hi, Bishop Wright. Okay.
What happens at BTS stays at BTS. But all of you, to a certain degree, have from what I know of you, have an entrepreneurial spirit. There's a startup-ness to all of you in your very different contexts. I've been thinking about this since yesterday, that we're not just talking about starting stuff just for the sake of starting new things, especially after the panel conversation with Mary and Elizabeth and I guess that was the last panel conversation last night. I've been thinking about this idea of creating another way, creating communities that actually aren't necessarily as, I guess it was one of the last things that Regina said this morning, that change our communities, not just society, that we actually are trying to do things that change the way we are community together, and not just going straight out and thinking, hey, we're going to go change the culture, we're going to go change society, but actually reflecting back on the panel yesterday, which I think that was a great echo of like, how can we create societies, communities that actually in and of themselves are an announcement of the good news, actually do demonstrate another way, that golden rule and the platinum rule. You all are people that have a sense of how to be brave enough to go get something started, whether that's within an established system or to show up on a campus or just show up at an airport. And I know it's more than just showing up, but can you talk a little bit about that? Like, there's something uniquely different about it. It's a different entrepreneurial skill than just going and starting something. This is trying to create something that is an alternative to, that is in and of itself a gospel announcement. How do you do that? What does that look like? I think that's a question that a lot of people here are pondering, especially our seminarians, thinking about, what does this look like for me if I'm going to go out and do this kind of ministry?
Okay, different levels to that answer.
Yeah.
And when I say answer, I put a question mark behind it, because what I heard yesterday during Q&As, there were questions that I heard underlying saying, tell me how to do this. Give me a step-by-step way to do it. It doesn't exist. It doesn't. And that's freedom too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's freedom. That's why
right.
I'm like, woohoo, right? So there's
but
no...
really scary for a lot of
It
people.
is scary. So the freedom in that, in not having a blueprint, is that the Holy Spirit is there already. We've been talking about that. The Holy Spirit's there. So because of that context of not having a blueprint, no game plan, the tendency to cut off the Holy Spirit movement doesn't show up first. You know, it may show up a little bit later when things start to roll and you get frightened. But I think it enables, at least me, to be more open to the movement and to be more observant. My chaplaincy training enabled me to observe and to listen. And all of that applies to church planting. You know, the USF ministry is one thing. The church planting is quite another. My church plant, if I could put it into an image, would be here, just like this. There is no center. There is no meeting space. There are no people yet. So prayer is number one, rooted in the prayer. You know, God, please lead me to the people who you want to be a part of this new image and mission out there. The cool image is, and this is a blueprint, embrace the image of Edward Scissorhands. Because that is really, my rector asked me when I was called into this ministry, he said, Adrienne, give me an image for this church planting. And I said, well, are you ready? Because it's very theological. It's Edward Scissorhands. Because the stuff is there, and you're being called into, how do I nip here, or how do I shape there, and where do I step away? You know, do I even need to be over there? I've got two places that I'm supposed to be looking at for the bishop. There is one place that is naturally pulling me. There is a Chamber of Commerce out there where, you know, I have now joined, and I'm one of those people, and then let me just backtrack. You know, the entrepreneurial spirit, I don't want people to feel bad because, you know, they're like, well, I don't have that. You have something, and everybody doesn't have that particular gift,
right.
And that's okay. You know, we've been saying that all along. This stuff is scary. You know, but I'm one of those people, I walk into a cocktail party, I don't know you, I know you're talking already, but I'm gonna make my way into your conversation, and I'm gonna find out what you're talking about, and I'm gonna make it valuable for you that I'm there, and it's gonna be really valuable for me when I leave. There is purpose, right? So if I go to a party, or if I go to a networking session, there's a purpose for me being there. So when I say I'm working, I'm doing my ministry, I am working, and I come back with something tangible to move that ministry forward. So even though on the surface it's very nebulous, I'm always working within some type of metric, some type of expectation, but I'm not married to the outcome.
That's important. Yeah. Chip, what about you?
Ditto.
Yeah. You guys are such good listeners to each other. You're modeling it well.
I'm sorry, did you say something?
I like
Oh,
that.
my wife showed up. I said my wife showed up. We try to live into this asset-based ministry, and 3 of the assets that come to mind, we have a large 35,000 square foot plus building, actually 2, parish house and church, that was empty 5 years ago, and now it's full. We've repurposed it to include other 501(c)(3)s and other ancillary ministries that would help support us going forward into better supporting our local city of Huntington, West Virginia. To our location, we're downtown of a 50,000 population that unfortunately is number 1 in the United States in opioid overdose. That's not something that you want to put on your poster, but it is what it is. So we have flipped it on its head, and believe it or not, we actually consider it to be an asset. Asset not as in we want to perpetuate, asset as in what can you do to perhaps make the biggest impact, and that is to help cure a problem. And it's not that we don't have the cure, but we have developed new ministries. We partner with addiction recovery centers, 3 or 4 of them locally. As an extension of this, we have a food program, which is on a Wednesday night as well as a Saturday morning. Between the 2, we now do 15,000 hot meals a year. We have 3 501(c)(3)s that we've developed. One is a food pantry that services 5,000 families. We have another 501(c) that has developed a wonderful new relationship with Marshall University and their medical outreach. So on any given Saturday of the month, we have 12 or 15 doctor wannabes that give free medical services in the form of, we actually become a Bedouin city on a particular Saturday of every month. So you have these wonderful, beautiful, big, large, billowing white tents. And it's visually stunning. And each tent represents a different ministry. One will be checkups, another is dental, another is medicine, pharmaceutical. So it's this wonderful medical ministry. So building, downtown, Marshall University, we're really trying to live in and support those assets that we believe that God has set in our path.
It's beautiful. I love how that reframing of the problem as an opportunity. That's great.
Yeah.
Donna, what thoughts do you have?
I want to say if there's something that you may not consider yourself entrepreneurial or whatever. Sometimes I can't even say that word like just then. But if there's something that you find yourself thinking about a lot just as you're falling asleep, or right when you wake up and you're like, wow, I dreamt about that again. Would you please not do that or do that? Would you please remember that we are here because some key people a long, long time ago paid attention to the dreams and visions that came to them close to and in the midst of their their sleeping hours? Right? We're here because people, what would have happened if Joseph hadn't paid attention to dreams, or Mary, or we wouldn't be here. That's what, right? So if you have one of those things, and if you think it's crazy, that really is okay. So would you talk to somebody that you know, or somebody that you don't know if you're afraid it sounds too crazy, and just say, I have this thing, and see how they respond. And my experience has been in a community of a parish. If one person will be brave and say that thing that keeps bothering them or that keeps exciting them, if they'll say it out loud, almost always there's at least one other person, maybe somebody they don't even know yet, who's right there gathering regularly in the same buildings with them for worship. If they'll say it out loud, somebody else will say, I've been thinking the same thing, right? So, and in the case of what I do in the airport, many people think that was my idea. It is not my idea. It's a God idea that came to a group of people in Atlanta in 1980, including some very faithful Episcopal lay people. And almost nobody knew that they were serving as chaplains at the airport. But I got to know some people who knew them, and I started learning the history of the chaplaincy of Atlanta Airport, so that one day when my bishop said, "So, you're teaching part-time, and what else do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be at the airport." And he said, "You have my attention." Right? So Scripture says, be ready in season and out of season, always, to give an account for the hope that is within you. And if your idea is hopeful to you, chances are it is hopeful to somebody else. Right? So it can't just be my good idea that I had sitting around the parish hall drinking coffee with other people, right? But if it's something that keeps coming, Parker Palmer, let's give a shout out to Parker Palmer. He says, "Let your life speak." I used to, when I first heard that, I was like, yes, I will always speak up for Jesus. Yes, I will. I will let my life speak. But that's not what he's talking about. He's like, listen to your own life. What keeps happening? What patterns do you see when you look backward and forward and when you pay attention? Here's one. My very first memory that I know is my own is at age 2, going to meet my grandmother, guess where? At Atlanta Airport.
Yeah.
So, in ways that I would not understand until much, much later. When I went that night with my family to meet my grandmother, I went to meet the world. And I still get to do it every week.
That's
awesome.
beautiful.
That's awesome.
And so do you.
Yeah.
I want to touch on the
Yes.
word dream. You know, again, with this missional movement that we're all jumping into and really trying to get a hold of, I'm so glad that you used the word dream, because years ago when I started a business, I said, you know, what's going to get people excited and what is the truth of this business? And the theme for me was dream outrageously. Dream outrageously, which is really scary, and plan strategically.
Yes.
So with my background in PR and marketing, that is what we did day in and day out. You can dream all you want to, but they want a plan that you will follow with a timeline. And it didn't inhibit the dream. It was just making it more real. Once you put the strategy together that bumps up against your core objective, then you can move into the tactics. You know, that's what makes the dream alive. And it makes it less scary because you have what we're looking for, which is a roadmap. So, you know, I know the word strategic planning doesn't always sit well in church, but, you know, it's important that we look at it from that perspective, because when we start in tactics, which is where churches start, you know, let's have a bake sale. Let's do this. Let's do that. Your tactics is your to-do list. But then you ask people, well, why are you still doing that? If you only got 2 people to run the bake sale and nobody wants to bake, you know? Or you make $5 after standing there for 8 hours. You have to ask the question, how are we going to get the objective, which is the mission? What's the overall perspective? How do we get there? That's the strategy. And once you figure out the how, that's when you go to the tactics. That's the last place we should go. And so if I leave anything here, it is, if you're doing a whole bunch of stuff, stop and ask why. And make sure it bumps up against your primary mission. And if it doesn't, don't do it.
Yeah.
Perhaps
So true.
consider
Right now.
trading
Don't
in
do
your
it right now.
shotgun for a laser. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I've heard you guys, it's, you know, this idea, if we are going to incarnate the good news, if we are going to be a part of this Jesus movement, it really does start with what's keeping you up at night. What are you dreaming about? What are you hoping for? Share it with others. Find out where. See if you get some resonance with people. Pray.
Oh, yeah.
Plan. Be purposeful. Find partners. Leverage what you have. leverage pain as or brokenness as opportunities, and be open to different outcomes. Be open to change. Hold it all lightly. That seems to be what I'm hearing you talk about. Would you add to that?
We've mentioned good news, but we have not yet addressed a very real fact. And a very real fact to starting something new, trying to live into the ministry of Jesus Christ, is that sometimes there's pain. There is a cost. Sometimes there needs to be, and it's been alluded to earlier in this conference, but sometimes there needs to be a crucifixion before there can be a resurrection.
Maybe always.
And I can tell you that there's been on more than one occasion that on any particular Sunday, a particular group within my most beloved friends and family members in the pews have wanted me to be on the cross. And it's really hard. It's really hard because I love them. It's really hard because it's not just about me. It's really hard because many times I've had to partner with those outside of our church to help our church in some way, shape, or form better live into what we hope to be at our local church. Ecumenism is should be another asset that we can all live into. I do not seek others to help our church. But if there's a ministry that, frankly, no one is responding to within the parish, or very few, sometimes we need help. Sometimes we need help.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. We want to go ahead and open it up to you all. So if you have some questions, and Tamara, would you come on up?
And Tamara's
So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, please raise your hand, and we will bring the mic to you. We've got one in the back here, and then one right here. Yeah, go ahead.
The touchstone of you as a
Hi, Kate Heichler here in DC. I'm great for the stories that we've gotten to hear this morning. I have a question for Chip. In this really exciting missional work, is there a connection, an explicit connection to the worship and formation life in the congregation?
Yeah, and it's very outside the box, unfortunately, for me, and I think for them. I would much rather be efficient with my time and say, you know what? 815 has this wonderful formation. Let's live into it. It's already been researched. It's already there. Click on it. Read it. Let's talk about it. But unfortunately, we have not received a response to that. So we've gone outside tradition, and what I've done is do small group. I've tried to return to the first century church where it's a house church concept, not in mass. I've tried to go more one-on-one than even group, trying to meet folks where they are. I'm trying to remember that we're not in the 1950s or the 1960s, but we're in the 21st century where people no longer have Sabbath on Sunday, they may work. We no longer have blue laws. Little Susie and Billy play soccer and hockey and football. So sometimes we have to go outside of our bricks and mortar, and many times we have to go outside Sunday.
Yeah, thank you. I think we had one in the back here. Hey, Becky.
Hi, this question is for Adrienne, but other people y'all can answer it too. I am finishing up my second year at Georgetown University as a campus missioner, and I ask every single campus missioner I know, what do you wish you knew when you started?
Oh, goodness. Still asking that question. I wish I knew that I wouldn't have structures already set up there for campus ministry. I thought it was an established kind of thing that I would jump into. I have a building, but there was nothing there to walk into. And when I say there, I mean religious row. So we've got the Methodist house, my house, Hillel, which is the Jewish center, and then we have the Baptist house and the Roman Catholic house right across the street. So that's all religious row. And when I began my relationship building, I spent the first 6 months of my ministry just not doing any programming at all. You know, getting to meet people. You know, what's going on here? Why do you look like that when I talk? You know, that's what made me say, there's something going on here that I need to get to the bottom of. and it was the lack of support. It wasn't from my church. There was some kind of energy that I felt when I walked in the room when we had the campus ministers get together. I thought we were to be there to support each other and also to create an organization that would support the spiritual wholeness of the student body, the faculty, and the staff. And it's not that way. It's disappointing, and there's a lot of competition, which, I don't have time for. But I'll open my doors and I say, you know what? This space is for you too. And if you want to focus on winning souls for Jesus and the numbers that you have coming to your program, that's okay. But that's not what I was called here to do. It is to be present and to make sure that the people who are looking for what you don't offer, they can come to us and say, I never realized the Episcopal Church did this stuff. The students that I have coming to the center are not Episcopalian. They are coming from backgrounds where they couldn't ask questions about Scripture. They couldn't, one guy who showed up, who actually comes to all the Bible studies, this guy showed up and he used the word seeking. He showed up and he said, I am seeking a place where I can study the Word. And I said, really? Who sent you here? So we ended up talking for an hour and a half in the chapel, and he told me, he said, I came to you because I haven't been to an Episcopal church service, but what I've been studying about you guys is that you all have some structure. And I said, do we have structure? I said, might I introduce you to the Book of Common Prayer? I gave him that book. Bible study turns into catechism. He is studying the BCP. And, I'm just going to throw this out here, but sitting with him, I feel like we got potentially an Episcopalian coming. And it was not my work. It was me being there and responding to him and not getting caught up in all this other, that surrounds ministry normally. I'm there for people. I love people. If you show up, we're going to have a conversation, and Jesus will be a part of it. So,
can I just add, as a former, but you're always a student affairs professional, I used to try to give my money away to campus ministers. I was a student activities director, and they were like, well, I don't want to proselytize, or I have so many other things to do. There are a lot of people with some money on campus. Show up to the football game with your collar on if you wear one. Show up to the student activities thing. Show up to the dance party, particularly on Halloween, which can be a dangerous time for people on campus. Being a presence at Halloween, trust me, you're going to find some souls that need you to be present with them. Absolutely. There are things that are happening on campus, and often I see campus ministers trying to get people to a place rather than sit in your student life office, your student government office, or your student activities lounge, or your campus, whatever the central place is, and just say hi to people, volunteer for move-in day. Like, there are a lot of things that you don't have to actually need. You don't need any money to do it. Other people have money that they want to give you to do it. So there are resources on campus that are there to support the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you're a part of a sorority or a fraternity, use that.
Use it.
Use it, absolutely.
I wasn't.
I was, and that was the first thing I thought of when I was called into that ministry. I need to find the president of my sorority. And I did. And my first big event there was going to a step show. What? Rocking my 1993 numbers on my shirt and my collar. Right. Okay. But I mean, you're absolutely right. It's all of that. And it is on that other level too, where I think campus ministers miss. And, they're so focused, a lot of people are focused on students. How can I, make sure they're active and having a good time? I spent my initial months making conversations and relationships with the University Counseling Center. That's the place where I need them. If something goes down on the campus, they need to know that out of everybody on Religious Road, there is one clinically trained chaplain who can come and be a professional person that you can trust.
And plan a prayer service that's not centered on one religious
That's
presence.
Right. That's right. And that's what the training does. But they don't know it until you tell them. And so that was my thing. Who is this? Who do I need to talk to? You know, they're like, oh, we didn't even know that place was open. I said, well, technically, here I am, right?
In my 1993.
In my 19, Roger, right?
And if that didn't attract them, oh.
Yeah, but beyond the students knowing me now, because that's a slower process, the people who make decisions know me. And because I am a missioner, I do like Paul did. If I'm with the students, I'm in my khakis. I still look professional. I'm not in, short shorts or anything, but I'm in, my khakis, and I had shirts made that brand me. Shirts that say chaplain, shirts that have the Episcopal shield on it. And when I'm with the administration, I show up with a nice suit on and my collar on because it allows them to hear me differently. So I'm very conscious of what I look like, how I speak, who I'm around. All of that came from my background before I even said yes to this call. So it's important to take whatever you have that's bringing you to the ministry, use it, figure out how you can polish it and package it so that it can uniquely equip you for your unique ministry that you've been called into.
Love that. Any other questions? Raise your hand.
It's funny to not have questions for the thing on voices, right? That's funny.
By the way.
You have questions for us?
No, I was just saying it's funny that there's no questions on the panel on incarnational voices.
We probably talked a lot.
We talk too much.
I add one thing just briefly. And that is,
Yes.
one of the things that I wished I had knowledge of or connection with going into ministry was a better understanding of family systems. I was very fortunate to come back to VTS under David Gortner. David, are you out there? David's been a friend and a mentor. But anyway, I got my team in here, and a large part of that learning was connecting with, having a deeper understanding of family systems. And that's, you can have vision and dreams, but it really helps if you better understand people, where they're coming from. It's not about necessarily being right or wrong. It's like it is what it is, and then there's the working with that. And that was a tool that really helped me.
That's awesome, yeah. Back to the listening, being able to hear the other, It's great. Any other questions? We don't want to, oh, there we go, right there.
So I think as we've talked about assets and as we talked about mission, we're talking about it in terms of like a lot in human assets and built spaces. But as we're talking about this, like these incarnational questions and incarnational realities, I wonder how the particularities of place and the environmental assets and environmental communities, the specifics of the geographies that we're a part of, and thinking outside of just the sort of anthropocentric, like who are we reaching out to, but how is that also expanded throughout creation? How does creation factor into how we should think about these questions?
Okay.
Adrienne, you have something to say?
Did you see that? Did you see the shade?
The shade.
Shade is real. Okay, so it's important, bloom where you're planted. You've heard that before. And it's important to be conscious of where you are. I have a building that, yes, is on a college campus, but this is the college campus proper, and Religious Row is all the way down where Donna is. So for me, I have a unique challenge that, if you're a student and you need prayer, you can't just in between class say, oh, I really need to talk to the chaplain, let me stop in and get prayer, or let me rest and then go to school. You have to intentionally come to the center, which is why I go to campus often. However, I've been able to do what I call a push-pull effect, which is what I did many times in my career, and that is push out the message, and that could mean embodying Christ. It doesn't necessarily mean proclaiming verbally, but pushing out the message so that people are pulled to resources. Because I'm on campus and I'm at the outskirt there, right across the street, we have the Catholic Student Center building a 220-bed facility for students. But guess what? The construction workers are there. And my chapel door is open because before I got called into this, the ministry that excited me and still does is workplace chaplaincy. And the first thing I thought was, those construction workers, yeah, they work there. Yeah, they can get coffee at the Catholic Student Center. But who really wants to hang out and rest in the place where they work? you can just cross the street and come over, sit in the chapel, get coffee, relax, have another space for rest. There is an apartment complex right across the street. So it is important to say, you know what, yes, this is a campus ministry, but that doesn't mean it's only for the campus. This spiritual resource of the Episcopal Chapel Center, the vision for it is that it will be available to everybody in that community, for workplaces, for the staff, for the people at Chick-fil-A, and in the cafeteria where the students are. So the joy would be to have the police officers who hang out in front of my building come on in and grab coffee. And they're the ones that the relationships are being built with right now. So
The other piece, because I work on the Episcopal Asset Map, is that part of what a lot of churches are doing is this creation piece, is that we have a lot of property as the Episcopal Church. And a lot of that property can be cultivated for food and bees and other things that connect to creation. And so there's a movement called Cultivate on the site. It's currently called Faith, Food, and Farm, but that was a bad word and people didn't think it was funny. EFFN, effin. So they've changed their name to Cultivate, to better branding. And so, but that's a great resource, and you can add them to your asset map, community gardens and things of that nature, where people are realizing, there's one church in Louisiana, I know they had wanted to reinvent community gardens, and so they just have 10 beds on their land. They have a lot of food insecurity in their neighborhood, and they also can use it as a teaching tool about creation. The Episcopal Relief and Development has a teaching tool on creation and formation. We can talk about that later too. So there is a way in which what we might see as dying, having more spaces that aren't being used, can be utilized for creation care.
And so, my context at the airport, right, it's entirely a built environment. It's 4,700 acres. The buildings comprise almost 10 million interior square feet. And I have this handy badge that lets me go all over those places. And so I do. And I'm a positive, active, visible Episcopal presence. There are people everywhere. People pass through and say, I stopped in the chapel and you weren't there. I'm like, thank you? What? Why would I be in the chapel, right? If I'm not presiding at Eucharist, why would I be in the chapel? So, being out and just encountering people. So I want to suggest in a built environment where most of the people you're encountering are going to have to remain indoors, then what I see happening there in those very mundane public spaces is those are mundane public spaces, and what does our tradition say? Where 2 or 3 are gathered? Every time there's an encounter, there is a safe space, a sanctuary is formed. Comes together and disappears again, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there when it was there, right? So just inviting people into those being there, being yourself and being present in a space, right? And if you are in a ministry context like that, like it's easy to go to the coffee shop, right? I think that's a great recommendation. If you have an office in your church or in your campus center, also go make another office in some public space, right? Yep. But don't think that that's the magic bullet either, because guess what? If you go even in a collar into the coffee shop and hide behind your screen, most people are not going to come up and talk to you. Just saying. But if you go...
all are welcome.
But all are welcome. Y'all, I went and I was there for 6 hours and not one person came up and talked to me. People just are not interested in Jesus. What? People, right? So be there and
And if
engage.
you don't have a collar, just have a sticker on your computer. It's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. But just hang out and be available, and don't be. I run experiments. Sometimes I think I'm making that up, but so one experiment in the airport is, how many more interactions, we call those ministry touches, isn't that nice? If you count those, you can count thousands, yeah? How many more ministry touches happen in a 5 to 10 minute interval when my phone is in my pocket versus when I am, while I'm walking, holding it, even if I'm not looking at it, right? And it goes up enormously because people are looking to be seen, and some people are looking not to be seen, right? But how do you negotiate the environment? That's the question, right? Whether it's the natural environment or whether it's the built environment, and we are constantly creating and being shaped by our environment. So I think we have more influence than we sometimes know.
Yeah.
It's all proactive work.
Yes.
And rest assured, people are seeing you even when you think they're not looking.
Absolutely.
Friends, will you thank our guests with...